I'd like to introduce John Shaw. John Shaw is a reference librarian at the State Library. He's a genealogist, author of The Genesis of the New Jersey State Library, 1703 to 1796, a documentary history. He is also the author of numerous articles and a frequent lecturer. John has presented at previous DANJ conferences, and we're delighted to have him back again this year.
Thank you very much, and thank you for that introduction. Let me begin today by saying that I'm especially delighted to be here, and I will tell you why. This is a first for me. In my career, limited as it has been, as a public speaker, the Documents Association of New Jersey is the first organization to invite me back to speak a second time. Some of you may remember that 2 years ago I spoke here about the U.S. Census. As you might imagine, I was quite flattered by the invitation to speak again, though I must admit that the invitation reminded me of a story I heard many years ago that gave me pause. A story about Italy, opera, and encores. It is said that opera is part of the Italians' life and that they attend it with the same enthusiasm and lack of reverence that is found with baseball games in America. Once, quite some time ago, at a performance of I Pagliacci in Naples, in the second act, after the soprano had finished her aria, there broke out wild applause from a number of people in the balcony and calls of encore, encore. They wouldn't stop until the singer repeated the aria, and then they forced her to sing it a third time. At that point, a gentleman sitting on the main floor stood up and shouted to the balcony, "What are you doing? She's terrible." To which someone in the balcony shouted back, "She'll sing it until she gets it right." With that in mind, today I will do my best to get it right. This year we are celebrating New Jersey's 350th anniversary. When initially approached about this talk, I was asked if I could come up with a topic of interest to DANJ members that would also relate in some way to the New Jersey 350 celebration. I took this to mean, could I sneak in a little New Jersey history while talking about some facet of government publications? The idea seemed reasonable, and I began wondering what government publications looked like, or if there even were any in New Jersey 350 years ago. So a few months ago, I began rummaging around in New Jersey's past, looking for government publications. And in the process, I discovered the answers to two questions, which I will make the focus of my talk today. Before taking a look at the questions, though, I would like to return to my title for a moment, The Government Document in Early New Jersey History. I find myself sometimes writing government document, at other times government publication, and even occasionally public document. For the most part, I've tried to stick to the DANJ's apparent choice, government publication. Though you will hear the others from time to time, I consider them all the same, but at times one sounds better in context than the others. For example, at least to me, government document librarian sounds better than government publication librarian, and public document works well when I'm emphasizing the public aspect of the publication. Now, on to my two questions. What was New Jersey's first government publication? And what makes government publications different? As my wife would immediately say, different from what? But I'll leave that for later. In answering these two seemingly unrelated questions, I hope to reveal to you some interesting history and describe the world of government publications, both state and federal, before there was a GPO or an FDLP, before there was a public printer or a superintendent of documents, before there was a monthly catalog or a SUDOC classification system. So, how does one go about finding New Jersey's earliest government publication? James Bennett Childs wrote in his article on government publications, "Almost from the beginning of time, governments in some form or another have existed as organized means of survival." And venturing an observation of my own, I presume that these governments, even in earliest times, had a need to pass information to their citizens, such as laws, reports, proceedings, and policies. This leaves us with the question, at what point in time did these communications from government begin to appear in the form we would recognize as government publications? Mr. Childs provides a very specific answer to that question. He writes, "For practical purposes, here, government publications can be said to date from after the invention of printing from movable type in the 1400s, or subsequent to the introduction of printing in the various jurisdictions. To have a government publication, you need a government, or in Childs' words, a jurisdiction, and then you need a printer serving that jurisdiction. The two together give you the potential for government publications." Today, let's begin by examining the origins of New Jersey, our jurisdiction, and then look for early printers serving New Jersey to see if we can determine when the two combined for the first time to produce a publication. This is where I will satisfy my New Jersey 350 requirement for a little history. This document, signed on June 24th, 1664, is sometimes called New Jersey's birth certificate. Joe Klett brought some pamphlets made by the archives, and it says right on the front, New Jersey's birth certificate. It has the full text of the document in it. It is a document in which James, Duke of York, the brother of the English King Charles II, conveyed the ownership of land in America lying between the Hudson and Delaware rivers to two English courtiers, Sir George Carteret and John Lord Berkeley. The document specifies that said tract of land is hereafter to be called by the name or names of New Caesarea or New Jersey. This is a rather remarkable document, considering the fact that the land being conveyed was at the time part of the Dutch colony of New Netherland. I don't think the Dutch would have approved of this transaction if they had known about it. So, what really happened? Where did this document come from, and what happened after it was signed? I'm going to use a few timelines to explain New Jersey's origins. This one shows the first four Stuart kings. I like this period in English history. I can remember the names, numbers, and order of the kings by the symmetry. James, Charles, Charles, James, two firsts on the left, two seconds on the right, with the interruption of Oliver Cromwell right in the middle. There are, unfortunately for my symmetrical picture, a few Stuart monarchs off to the right that I don't show, that unbalance the symmetry, William and Mary and Queen Anne, but that is a minor detail. We are interested today in the midsection. This is the same timeline with four red arrows indicating events that are of special interest to us today. In the 1640s, there was a civil war raging in England. The parliamentarians were fighting the royalists for control. King Charles I was eventually defeated and executed. During and after the conflict, his son, Prince Charles, who eventually became King Charles II, had to go into exile on a number of occasions, and on two of these occasions, he spent time on the island of Jersey. Note the two arrows on the left. During his second stay on the island, shortly after the death of his father, Charles gave to Sir George Carteret, the governor of Jersey, some islands in Virginia to thank him for his hospitality and support. To these islands, the name of New Jersey was given by patent under sign manual and royal seal on February the 11th, 1650. Carteret attempted to send colonists to populate this first New Jersey, but their ship was captured by the parliamentarians, and the name New Jersey had to wait another 14 years before being used again. Now take a look at the two arrows on the right. In 1660, King Charles II was restored to the throne, and not long after, he claimed that New Netherland should be English. He gave the claimed land to his brother, James, Duke of York. James sent a ship to capture the land from the Dutch, thus making it his, and he conveyed the land below the Hudson River to Carteret and Berkeley. And again, for the second time, the name of Carteret's home, Jersey, was used to identify land in America. And this time it stuck. For those of you who may be wondering where the island of Jersey is, I have a map. At one time, during the English Civil War, Jersey was the only place in the English realm that supported Charles II as king, and that was the doing of Sir George Carteret. Here's another timeline of sorts. I hope you won't mind if I venture off on a tangent for a minute, as you are admiring this slide, or perhaps just trying to decipher it. Much as I enjoy public speaking, I also find it frustrating. I'm up here in front of you talking away, and I know exactly what I'm saying, but I have no idea what you're hearing. I try to compensate for this by sharing drafts of my talks with my wife to get her reactions before going in front of an audience. She is a good listener, and she has no trouble pointing out when I'm boring her to death, when I am wandering off topic, and when I spend too much time making a brilliant point that no one but me gives a hoot about. With this slide, I can see her eyes beginning to glaze over. She always encourages me to resist dates. Dates are boring, she says. When reading, you can at least study dates, compare dates, refer back to dates, but when listening, most dates go in one ear and out the other. Too many dates spoil the speech. I'm doing my best to follow her counsel, but as you have already seen, some dates will slip through. I have to admit that between my slides and my text, I have already dropped 9 dates on you. I am clearly approaching the danger zone. On this slide alone, I could have shown 6 more specific dates, but instead I buried them in the timeline at the top, which I encourage you to ignore. What I would like you to see are the 2 governors over on the left. Richard Nicolls, who defeated the Dutch and became governor of New York, which at the time he thought included New Jersey, and Philip Carteret, who was sent to govern New Jersey but did not get there until a year after Nicolls, who knew nothing about New Jersey until Carteret's arrival. So, you might ask, what does any of this have to do with government publications? Shortly after taking New Netherland from the Dutch, Richard Nicolls made a trip to Boston. And while he was there, he visited a printer, Samuel Green, the only printer working in England's American colonies at the time. His visit resulted in the printing of what looks to me like a government publication, the first issued by the government led by Richard Nicolls. Here it is, a broadside intended to encourage the settlement of the new colony. Unfortunately, at least for my case here, at the time of its publication, New Jersey had already been separated from New York for 10 months, though Nicolls was not aware of that fact. With that in mind, I guess I will have to call this the first New York government publication. After all, Nicolls, the governor of New York, was the author, and New Jersey had already been separated from New York, though its first governor, Philip Carteret, had not yet arrived to break the news to Nicolls. Here he is, arriving at Elizabethtown, Philip Carteret, first governor of New Jersey and distant cousin to Sir George Carteret. It is my understanding that this painting hangs in the Essex County Courthouse in Newark, though I have not seen it myself. It is an impressive scene. There is another picture of the event that has a slightly different look. Take a look at Carteret. See anything different about him? In this version, he carries a hoe over his shoulder. The story goes, on a summer day in 1665, Philip Carteret landed. He set up no crosses and made no prayers, but with a hoe over his shoulder, he marched at the head of his men as a sign that he meant to live and work among them. A little way inland, he chose a spot in which to build his town and called it Elizabeth, in honor of Sir George Carteret's wife. Remember how messy the first 2 years of New Jersey looked in my chart with its change of owners and what appeared to be overlapping governors? Well, things are about to get worse. Note the red arrow. 9 years after the English took control of New Netherland, the Dutch returned. As Woodrow Wilson wrote in his History of the American People, for just over a year, the Dutch were masters in their old seats. There was no New York, no New Jersey. All alike was New Netherland once more. But it was a mere episode, a mere passing reminder of the old days when the Dutch were really masters there. In 1674, the war ended, and England regained her provinces by the Treaty of Peace. When the English returned to power, ownership of New York and New Jersey reverted back to the king. Here is a look at what happened at the time. At the top, the Dutch capture New York and New Jersey. A year later, the provinces are returned to England. But before the English reassumed control of New Jersey, Berkeley, one of our two owners, original owners, who needed money, sells his half share of New Jersey to John Fenwick in trust for Edward Billing. Because of the capture of New York and New Jersey by the Dutch, legally, Berkeley no longer owned a half share of New Jersey. No matter, Berkeley went ahead with the sale. Then, for reasons I will not try to explain here, Fenwick transfers his recently acquired half share to William Penn, Gowan Laurie, and Nicholas Lucas. At that point, Sir George Carteret, probably pretty much upset about the whole deal, agrees to divide New Jersey into two provinces, keeping East Jersey for himself and giving West Jersey to William Penn and his group of Quakers. This event is shown on my slide as the quintipartite deed. For the sake of clarity, I will take a moment now to point out that the original owners of New Jersey, Carteret, Berkeley, Penn, Laurie, and Lucas, and later others, were called proprietors, which is why the period 1664 to 1702 in New Jersey is called the proprietary period. Through various transactions completed during this period, the number of proprietors increased significantly. Joe Klett, one of our speakers for this afternoon, will be covering this period in his talk this afternoon, so I will not hazard any further explanation and just skip to 1702, when the proprietors of both East and West New Jersey gave up their right to govern the two colonies to Queen Anne, and New Jersey became a unified royal colony under her direct control. Lord Cornbury was chosen to be governor, and members were elected to serve in the province's House of Representatives. At their first session, they passed a law, and then for the first time, the law was printed. Here it is. The first 10 words are Latin and translate as, "In the second year of the reign of Queen Anne, Queen of England, Scotland, France, and Ireland." All that follows is in English, beginning with at a General Assembly, begun at Perth Amboy in New Jersey, the 8th day of November, Anno Domini 1703. Here's the first page of the text of the law. an act for regulating the purchasing of land from the Indians. It was printed by William Bradford in New York City in 1703. William Bradford was the first to bring printing to England's middle colonies in America. He set up his press in Philadelphia in 1685. Later, he moved to New York City, where he printed a number of New York government publications before printing this document for New Jersey. With this publication, two firsts were achieved. Not only did Bradford print New Jersey's first government publication, he also produced New Jersey's first typographical error. Note that in the year of the reign of should be Anno Regni, or maybe the G is silent, I don't know, and rather than, as Bradford printed it, Anno Rengi. I thought I would put a human face on some of this history by selecting a famous, or in some cases not so famous, person to represent each major era I will cover today. We have already seen my first representative, Philip Carteret, arriving in New Jersey. He represents government. Next, I needed someone to represent New Jersey's early printers. William Bradford was my first choice, but when I went looking for a picture of him, all I could find was this: his headstone in the Trinity Churchyard in Lower Manhattan. This would not do, so I turned to my second choice, the best known of all colonial printers. Here he is, arriving in Philadelphia for the first time with the rolls of bread under his arms and his future wife watching from the doorway. This is one of the most memorable scenes from Benjamin Franklin's autobiography. Who better to represent the colonial printers of America than Franklin? He lived and worked in Pennsylvania, but New Jersey has some claim on him in that he printed many publications for the colony. This is a page from the New Jersey Assembly's Votes and Proceedings for 1740. It shows the order for printing. By virtue of an order of the House, I do appoint Benjamin Franklin to print these votes. A. Johnston, Speaker. Governments and printing seem to naturally go together. The Royal Colony of New Jersey employed 8 printers during its colonial period. 20 years after becoming a state, the New Jersey legislature owned enough books to call their collection a library. Here is a list of the titles in their collection in 1796. This is an inventory of the books belonging to the New Jersey legislature. There are 33 titles, representing perhaps 200 or so volumes. This list could be considered the New Jersey State Library's first catalog, but perhaps catalog is a bit too grand a term for it. Let's take a closer look at some of the items on the list. Here we see printed laws from New York, Pennsylvania, and New Jersey. The New Jersey laws are in the book listed on line 11, the third line on this slide. Grants and Concessions by Leeming and Spicer, which is a collection of government documents including laws from New Jersey's proprietary period. The text of the June 24th, 1664 release creating New Jersey appears here in print for the first time. Leeming and Spicer were members of the New Jersey Assembly, which published the book in 1758. The Journals of the Old Congress on the last line is a federal publication, the Old Congress being the U.S. Congress under the Articles of Confederation. We also see 2 books that are not government publications, Paley's Philosophy and Blackstone's Commentaries. Note that all the titles on the list are greatly abbreviated and that little information beyond the brief titles is included. Clearly, the person compiling the list had no interest in who printed the books or the date of publication. For some of these items, it is difficult to tell what book is being referred to. There are 2 different laws of New York on the list, but no information to help distinguish one from the other. This list leads me to believe that in 1796, no one was much concerned with the concept government publication. A publication was a publication. The title was whatever few words reminded one of the book being noted. The publication's imprint was of no particular interest, and a catalog was a list. The New Jersey State Library published 3 printed catalogs during the first half of the 19th century, and they were all essentially lists, much like this one. I wonder, when did government publications become interesting? When did they begin to take on a life of their own? When did we recognize them as being different? This leads me to my second question for the day. I believe government publications are different in some ways from other books kept in libraries, and that the differences matter. The differences help to explain how we got to our current way of handling government publications, and eventually led us to, in some cases, treat them as special and develop a unique infrastructure for acquiring and maintaining them in collections. Having looked at a number of government publications, especially early ones, I have observed 3 characteristics that seem to set them apart. The first characteristic, and perhaps the defining characteristic of government publications, is that they are printed under the auspices of some government entity. This is perhaps not very enlightening, but what I want to emphasize is the close and important relationship that exists between governments and printers. A relationship that, as we have seen in New Jersey, began in the early 1700s. This close relationship at the federal level eventually resulted in the creation of the government printing office. The second characteristic involves the distribution of government publications. Governments are interested in seeing that their publications are distributed widely and preserved for future reference. I think the establishment of depository programs is a natural result. In fact, I hope to show that depository-like distribution, at least in New Jersey, has been with us since printers started printing. Eventually, at the federal level, the Federal Depository Library Program was created. The third characteristic involves cataloging and classification. I will contend that government documents, when collected in large numbers in libraries, encourage the development of special collections, special cataloging rules, and special classification schemes, such as the SUDOC classification. Let's begin by taking a look at depository and exchange programs. In the United States, histories of depository programs usually begin with the 1813 Congressional Joint Resolution requiring publications issued by Congress to be distributed to every state and territorial legislature, to each university and college in each state, and to the Historical Society incorporated in each state. But the idea of deposit goes back much further. From almost the beginnings of government publications in New Jersey, distribution has been important to legislators. Here is an example, is an order in the votes and proceedings for the printing of the minutes in 1752. This order directs that the votes of the House this session be distributed to the governor and the officers and members of the council and of the House, with enough copies for the members of the House to distribute copies around their districts. When the legislators had something printed, they usually knew who they wanted to receive a copy. In this case, the mandated distribution covers every copy to be printed. I've seen distribution lists like this one in the votes and proceedings as early as 1723, 90 years before the federal government began to formalize its depository program. And in the case of New Jersey, any publication received by the clerk of the House ended up in the legislature's library, the library that in 1796 became the New Jersey State Library. Even the federal government was using a depository-like distribution for some publications years before the 1813 resolution. In 1777, the Secretary of Congress began distributing volumes of the Journals of Congress to each state. These two volumes, the first and last in the series, were received by the New Jersey Assembly and deposited in their library shortly after publication. We saw the title a few minutes ago in the list of books on hand belonging to the legislature, where it appeared as Journals of the Old Congress. Government publications seem to lend themselves to exchange programs as well as depository ones. And in fact, the federal government initiated an exchange program even before the adoption of the Constitution. This text is from a congressional resolution adopted in 1785. Each state was requested to provide to the Secretary of Congress 13 copies of their legislative acts. The Secretary would then keep one and send each of the states one copy. Through this process, all the states would receive all the acts of all the other states. The New Jersey government participated in this and other later depository and exchange programs, and eventually passed various laws mandating programs for collecting and distributing New Jersey government publications. On the state library's website, you can read, "Since 1875, the New Jersey State Library has been the primary depository for official publications of state government." But I am inclined to push the date back much further. The way I see it, the New Jersey State Library has been the primary depository for official publications of state government since its founding in 1796. It is true that as the government got larger and more offices within the government began publishing documents, it eventually became necessary to formalize the library's depository status with various laws requiring that documents be sent to the library. There have also been a number of laws passed requiring the state government to deposit documents with various institutions, such as public libraries, colleges and universities, historical societies, the Library of Congress, and with other states. Whatever the mechanism, during the 19th century, the New Jersey State Library and other libraries across the United States acquired large numbers of government publications, and they had to figure out what to do with them. Today, how we manage government document collections is often different from how we manage other collections. There is something about government publications that encourages the development of specialized systems and tools. In the middle of the 19th century, cataloging practices began to change in ways that affected government publications. Remember the grants and concessions by Leeming and Spicer? Here is the publication's record in the New Jersey State Library's printed catalog of 1853. Like the first inventory in 1796, the catalog is still just a list, though the entries are grouped for the first time under some major headings. The entries themselves are still very brief. There was no attempt to transcribe full titles or provide information from the book's imprint. Now look at a record for this title that appeared 47 years later in 1900. Here we see the full title, and a very full title it is. Clearly, the brief title provided in the 1853 catalog left out a great deal. The 1900 record also provides additional descriptive information. The printer is listed, and the date of publication is included and correct, though the date appears nowhere in the publication itself. It looks to me like the period 1853 to 1900 was a time of change in library practices. Let's take a brief look at what was happening in libraries around the country during this period. Just as I had Philip Carteret represent the beginnings of government and Benjamin Franklin represent the beginnings of printing, I have selected a librarian to to represent this next period. Charles Coffin Jewett caught my attention for two reasons: his work in developing library catalogs and his leadership of the first Librarians' Convention in the United States held in New York in 1853. Jewett was the first librarian at the Smithsonian Institution and a proponent of the idea of a union catalog of all libraries in the United States. He strongly promoted the use of cataloging standards by all libraries. The agenda of the 1853 convention, chaired by Jewett, shows what topics were on the mind of librarians at mid-century. You can see at the top of this slide that the agenda included cataloging, classification, and indexing, exchanges between libraries, book selection, and of special interest to us, the distribution of government documents. In 1853, librarians were beginning to examine many of the fundamental issues of library science. 23 years later, in 1876, librarians from across the country met in Philadelphia and formed the American Library Association. That same year, Charles Cutter published his rules for a printed dictionary catalog, which made a major impact on government publications. I quote again my authority for today, James Bennett Childs. Probably much of the relative ease of access to government publications in American library catalogs is due to the foresight of the late Charles Ammi Cutter in advocating in his rules for a printed dictionary catalog entry for government publications without personal author, under jurisdiction, subdivided by agency or form. In the realm of government publications, major changes came in 1895 with the consolidation within the government printing office of the various activities of the superintendent of documents. For the first time, document sales, library distribution, and the cataloging and indexing of government publications were all under one administration. This act resulted in librarians looking very closely at the cataloging, classification, and indexing of government publications. And I think the resulting changes were influenced by a new way of looking at these documents. You might call it a new paradigm. Remember that term? Paradigm shifts were all the rage in the 1990s, and I still see the term used occasionally. In fact, I heard it used this morning when Dr. Clement Price referred to a paradigm shift. I never thought I would find use for the term. In fact, I'm not sure I know what it really means, but somehow it seems to fit here. A German archivist, Friedrich Fassius, captured the essence of this new paradigm when he wrote, "Government publications constitute a borderland between archives and libraries." As I was putting the final touches on this talk, my wife, acting as my surrogate audience, said, "Why don't you get rid of the slide about government publications being in that borderland between archives and libraries? It doesn't seem relevant." I knew immediately that I had a problem. There are 40 slides in this presentation. If I were asked to eliminate all but one, this is the one I would keep. For me, that sentence explains more about government publications than any other sentence I have read. Based on my wife's comment, I know I have some work to do if I'm going to get any of you to share my enthusiasm for Fassius's observation. The quote suggests to me that when handling government publications, we may gain some insight by looking at them from an archivist's point of view. I know this is an oversimplification at best, but this is my view of the basic principle of archival arrangement. Archivists build collections based on the principle that the structure of an archive should reflect the structure of the organization that produced the documents collected in it. This principle informs my understanding of much of what happened in government document librarianship in the late 19th and early 20th centuries. And much of what happened was influenced by one person who arrived at the government printing office in Washington, D.C. in 1895 to help implement some of the directives in the new Printing Act. Adelaide Hasse is the fourth and last person I will highlight today. Under her guidance, the Public Documents Library and its basic philosophy of organization came into being. Her first task when she arrived in Washington was to bring together all the government publications hidden away in government offices around the city. The story goes as follows. In May of 1895, she ventured forth with two enormous vans, each carrying a crew of men and a supply of government mail sacks, and began visiting offices all around Washington, D.C. In 6 weeks, Hasse gathered and classified about 300,000 volumes, setting aside a copy of each title for the library and storing the duplicate ones in bins. It always makes me a little uneasy when I'm looking at my productivity at work. And I think I'm doing pretty well. And then I remember Adelaide. What was the result? A reference library containing 12,000 documents was established, and 250,000 duplicates were made ready for immediate exchange or sale. In many ways, 1895 marks the beginning of modern government documents librarianship. Government publications had been around for a long time, but now they were becoming a distinct type of publication worthy of special treatment and study. A unique infrastructure was developing around them. An observation about Adelaide Hasse and a quote from her show that she saw herself operating in that borderland between archives and libraries. Hasse's biographer observed that as her understanding of government information deepened over time, Hasse became ever more convinced that the work with documents required an understanding of the structure and functions of government as an organization. Hasse herself wrote that the study of government documents or government publications or official literature is the study of the mechanism of modern government as expressed in its publications. The SUDOC classification system was a direct outgrowth of her approach to government documents. She began utilizing a system like SUDOC at the Los Angeles Public Library, where she began her career. She used a version of it when she created the Public Documents Library at GPO, and the staff at GPO continued to build on and improve her work after she left in May of 1897 to take a position at the New York Public Library. When it comes to Hasse, there is a great deal more I could talk about, but my time is running out. Today I covered 4 centuries and 4 people in about 40 minutes. That's moving pretty fast. Here's a look at a few highlights. As you can see, dates continue to pop up despite my wife's admonition to avoid them wherever possible. I just couldn't resist reminding you of a few we met along the way today. When I finished writing out this talk, it occurred to me that my little jaunt through history was essentially a series of arrivals. Philip Carteret's arrival in the 17th century brought government to the colony of New Jersey shortly after the colony's founding in 1664. Printers began to arrive in America during the 18th century, and with their arrival came government publications, the first New Jersey one being printed in 1703 by William Bradford. Having no picture of him, I had to turn to Benjamin Franklin to represent the group. Libraries started showing up in the early 19th century. The New Jersey State Library, with its founding in 1796, was a bit earlier than most. By the middle of the 19th century, governments with their printers had produced large numbers of government publications. Charles Coffin Jewett and other professional librarians arrived just in time to bring order to collections of these and other publications growing in libraries across the country. 1853 marks the first National Conference of Librarians in the United States. 1876, the founding of the American Library Association. Then, in 1895, Adelaide Hasse arrived at the government printing office to begin the work of organizing the government document collections of the 20th century. That's the past. You know better than I do the situation at present, and we will all get a glimpse of some of what the future holds when Deborah Mercer gives her presentation on the New Jersey Publications Digital Library. That's all I have for you today. Thanks for giving me your time and attention.
I'm going to introduce Deborah Mercer, who's from the State Library, and she's in charge of New Jersey collections.
Thank you. Thanks. So it's always my pleasure every year to announce the awards for the Best New Jersey Document and the Best New Jersey Website. So first I'd like to talk about the New Jersey Document. This award goes to a document which contributes to the expansion of knowledge for New Jerseyans, has great relevance, enhancing the quality of life, maybe even saving them money, is pleasant to browse or view online. This year, I'm pleased to announce that the recipient is the New Jersey Rate Council for their book, The Consumer Assistance Handbook, which can be found online at the Rate Council's website. And I was going to show you this, but unfortunately we can't get the internet up. The division of the Rate Council was formerly the division of the Ratepayer Advocate, is an independent agency in but not of the Department of Treasury. The mission is to serve as an independent advocate to make sure all classes of utility customers receive safe, adequate, and proper utility services at affordable rates and that are just and non-discriminatory. In addition, the Rate Council works to ensure that all consumers are knowledgeable about the choices they have with utility competition. The Rate Council represents the ratepayer as a class before the Board of Public Utilities when the utilities try to change their programs or raise their rates. You may have read about them recently opposing the sale of public water facilities to private companies, a move which they and others say will raise rates. Their consumer handbook is full of useful information for the energy consumer, such as how to shop and compare energy services, how to read your bill. They cover electricity, gas, telephone, cable, and water services, all in an easy-to-read and understand manner. The book also has lots of contact information. It all adds up to helping New Jersey residents be better informed about the state they live in and what rights and help they can expect. Today we have here from the Rate Council, Kimberly Holmes, Robin Roberts, and Carrie Nixon to receive the award.
First, I want to thank you, Dr. Price, for what your words have said. This is my very first time being here, and to Mr. Shaw, because you spoke about how records can have meaning and how they influence people. And Mr. Shaw also spoke about production, management, and distribution. And Rate Council, we heard those concerns because when Mr. Shaw spoke, he said, I know what I'm saying, but I have no idea what people are hearing. Well, with Rate Council, oftentimes we speak in acronyms. And we know what we're saying, but we have no idea if people are hearing what we're saying. So we created this book, and Robin bought a copy, and I also bought a copy, because this Consumer Assistance Handbook, it speaks to conservation. It addresses the issues that you may have with your utility bills and so on. This book is accessible online, but if you would like to have a hard copy, you could call us at 609-984-1460, and we can send you a copy. Again, that's 609-984-1460. I will leave a copy with you. And on behalf of our director's name is Stephanie A. Brand. She used to be an AAG in charge of litigation at the Attorney General's office, and she's been our director for 8 years now. I've been serving as the chief of staff for 10 years, and we have such a dedicated team that work together to produce this book. And memories are etched in that book because one of the members who helped us produce the book, she has since died, but what she researched and how she put the book together in terms of the pictures and everything It will always be etched in our minds. So again, on behalf of the Division of Rate Counsel, our director, Stephanie Brand, we thank you. We thank the members of DANJ for even considering us and for giving us this award.
Thank
So
you.
thank you so much.
Congratulations. And now we turn to the award for the best website. And unfortunately, we can't get the web connection to work, but I'm sure it's a site that you all use as librarians. You use it a lot, looking for statistics or helping your patrons. And that is the New Jersey Department of Health website, which has been newly reimagined. And the criteria we use for judging the best website is that it contributes to an understanding of state or local government process or functions, that the title reflects the contents, that it gives, that it relates to the patron, the citizens of New Jersey, and that it's generally pleasant to access and easy to use. When you look at the new Department of Health website, gone is the busy look of the old website based mostly upon the functions of the Department of Health. It's been replaced by putting the services that people are most interested right on the desktop as colourful tabs. Other services are available via the How Do I tab in the top right-hand corner. There's also a new tab for end-of-life issues, which is a very important issues at the moment. And today I have here with us Kathleen Bennett, who's the Chief Information Officer and Director of Policy and Strategic Planning with us, along with Eileen Troutman from the Department of Health.
Well, thank you so much for the award, folks from DANJ, and we hope you actually are able to go and use our website. We're hoping you're going to find it as useful as what we found from our what we call user acceptance testing group. We actually talked to a lot of folks throughout the state. We had people from AARP come in and actually test functionality and make recommendations on how to take information that we display and make it really accessible to consumers. How do you organize it? What do you put out there? And how do you interact with it? And so you'll see different things. For example, we have common navigation bars now on different pages, and you'll see that it says, for example, your health. And we go in to look at your health. Is it your health because you're looking from a family perspective, or you're a senior? Or is it a multicultural perspective? Or do you just want to see everything that we have going on? You can click and we filter accordingly. Not only that, but we also have what's called the State Health Improvement Plan. And I think this would be of a lot of interest to many of you sitting here today. It has hundreds of indicators associated with it. One of the things we did is that we made it incredibly transparent and incredibly easy to understand what's going on. So if you go to our new homepage, you'll see on the navigation bar an area called Health IT Facts and Findings, and in there is Healthy New Jersey 2020. You just click on the white box and it brings you to the Healthy New Jersey 2020 page. It looks a little like a SimCity board, but you can go through and click and it'll bring up, for example, if you want to take a look for maternal and child health and you click on improving birth outcomes, you'll see what are all the goals and objectives that we and our partner said for the next 10 years are our goals and objectives, jointly owned. We then tell you what's our story. We give you by the numbers. We tell you, what the strategy is. We give you additional links and information, and that's all in a little storyboard box. And this is on one page. We have a dashboard, and we're telling you, and we're being really transparent. What's our baseline, and how are we doing? Are we making progress towards it? And is it, in the green? Is it, progress, but it's not really what we'd hoped for, and it wasn't what we were looking for, on an ongoing basis? You'll be in yellow. Is it not making any progress and it's in red? And even worse, are we making negative progress and we're showing that negative progression? You click on the indicator and it can bring up, for example, maps, and you can take a look at the same data by race, by ethnicity. If we get raw data from our data contributors, you can actually start breaking it down to county level or even at some point the census block level. So for a lot of you that use this or have to help answer questions, when students come in and are doing their reports, or you have people from the community who want to know because they're trying to do community health assessment plans, this is a great tool. So we're really excited about it, and we're always open to, by the way, hearing more recommendations on how to make it more user-friendly and more transparent. We've had a great team working on it. Eileen Troutman is our Director of Application Development, so she has all web services below her. And I gotta say, this is an effort of a lot of state workers sitting there and re-envisioning what can we do and how can we do it better. And I've got to say that, this was a great team effort coming together. We had some help from, the State Office of Information Technology, who, just came along and said, let's figure out how to do this technology and make it work quickly. And then the other really neat thing about it is that everybody uses mobile devices today. So even though you can't get to the internet, if you want to check on your iPhone, you can bring it up. There you go. Somebody has it up. One call to the server is one of our favorite things. You can click on boxes and it will pop up something right away. It's because we try to limit the number of clicks that you have to do, and you don't have to wait for pages to load. So we try to be a lot smarter with the underlying technology as well. So that's the story with our website. We are thrilled that you guys actually noticed it, because it was one of my questions. How did you even stumble upon it? So we hope, though, it does become a great tool, and we're looking forward to improving it over the next year, because we've got new designs coming for what we call our secondary and tertiary pages. And again, any recommendations or ideas you have, our information is all available on the website. Please send us an email or give a call. And thank you so much for the award.
Thank you.